He got elected because people thought he was best in handling the economy. It turned out that he made a mess of it. Prices have gone up, and he tried to bully China.
Instead of actually dealing with these issues, what do we get? Bloviating nonsense. It's 100 days in, we're going to impeach him. But a lot of this is hyper-partisan sophistry intended to rile people up.
First of all, where did this guy come from? No, with all due respect, this is an idiotic thing to do. This is a political move to try to put him in good graces with the AOC crowd and the very, very far left radical crowd. I'm embarrassed for that congressman that he's doing that he's fallen to that level.
This congressman seems to think that having bad polling numbers is an impeachable offense. It is utterly laughable, and it's because the Democrats have no agenda.
People often say that days feel like hours when they're relaxing on the beach, but they also say it when they're highly stressed or having dental surgery. We could probably all agree that President Trump's first 100 days have felt more like 1,000. But is America basking in the sun while dreaming of a bright future? Or is it having a root canal surgery? Our esteemed panellists will grade the president on the economy, war, culture and immigration. Everyone has to give him some praise, and everyone has to criticise him too. Them's the rules today. I'm joined by founder and CEO of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, the author of Bad News in Second Class, Batya, Ungar-Sargon, the CEO of Timcast Media, Tim Pool, and senior presidential advisor for the US Agency for Global Media, Kari Lake. Well, a star-studded panel on a starry day. Cenk will be beamed into us imminently, I'm informed, so we'll leave him as this large black square at the moment, which has a kind of ominous feel to it. Let me start with you, Tim Pool, because you're not a full-on Trumper, but you're not a full-on Trump basher. You see some good, you see some bad. When you look at the 100 days in totality, what are you giving Trump on the scoreboard?
A regular grade, I guess, a B+. You know, what I would say is the DOGE firings, the getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse have been beyond my expectations. I'm absolutely happy with that. Selective tariffs, I'm a huge fan and have been a huge fan for a while. I do think universal tariffs, I'm very skeptical on, but I did vote for the man, and I do believe that it's been substantially better than what we've seen with Biden by miles. Deportation, I think, is going fairly well. I think a lot of the concerns and criticisms are overhyped, but we'll see. I think overall pretty good.
I mean, would you have said the same thing if Joe Biden had this first 100 days, which by any kind of yardstick have been pretty chaotic, a lot of changing, spinning plates, and a tariff war that so far has caused a lot of short-term damage to the US economy? In all honesty, would you have said the same analysis if it was Biden?
Probably not. I do think it's fair to point out that we're all going to be biased in some regard or another. And Donald Trump's administration, his worldview and his policies more align with me morally. And I think that's a big issue for most people. That being said, when Joe Biden came out and he was fighting against overdraft fees, I praised it. If Joe Biden had come out and said, we're going to put tariffs in these certain areas, in fact, I never criticized him on any of the tariffs he did. I think the issue is largely criticize where criticism is due and praise where praise is due. Donald Trump has certainly made some errors. He has this gaffe going around from ABC where he appears to genuinely believe Abrego Garcia actually had MS-13 written on his hand, which is incorrect. But, you know, if he's going to make mistakes, we accept those. If he's going to advance policies that are in line with the majority of Americans' moral views, or at least what I support, then I'm going to be substantially more forgiving on his errors than I would be for someone like Joe Biden, who represented open borders, trans surgeries for children, and other policies which I found to be destructive.
All right, Kari Lake, you're very pro-Trump. We know that. You know, I like Donald Trump personally. I speak to him quite regularly. I've got to say, though, this is a massive throw of the dice. He's come back into the White House. He's thrown everything, including the kitchen sink, up in the air. He has turned all establishment norms on their head. And right now, he's got very poor approval ratings and a really in shock US economy that doesn't quite know what it's going to do or how this all plays out. It's a roll of the dice, isn't it? Because at some stage, this has to work. If it doesn't work, then come the midterms, the Republicans are going to be in big trouble.
Well, let me start by saying I'm pro-America, and this is why I love President Trump and I love his agenda, because he has put our country first. I disagree with you. I think you're talking about some really bogus polling. I know how polling works. I ran for office twice. Trust me, I know how polling works. You can make a poll say anything. And it's typical for the mainstream media to try to downplay all of the accomplishments of President Trump and his incredible administration. He has had no choice but to go in like a bull in a china shop and move quickly. We were on the verge, Pierce, of losing our country after 4 abysmal years of Joe Biden. The inflation was out of control. The border was wide open. People were pouring in, including gangbangers like this guy that the fake news media is acting like is the second coming, this Kilmar guy. And they're going to bat for him. They don't give a damn about the American people. And so President Trump has had to act and move quickly. I'm glad he has, and he has overwhelming support. Even Tim talked about what he did with and what he is continuing to do with DOGE, coming in and cleaning out these agencies, pulling back, slimming down the bureaucracy. It has to be done or we will lose our country. We're not out of the woods just yet. And thank God for President Trump. Joe Biden had 100 excuses for why we had inflation, the open border, high gas prices, all kinds of problems. He had 100 excuses. President Trump simply needed 100 days to get things turned around. I can't wait for the next 100 days. Frankly, I wish we could have him for the next, 10,000 days, because we need a fighter like President Trump for the long road.
Give me one criticism of the 100 days so far.
I really don't see any criticism. And I'm not saying that because I know him and I like him. I'm saying that because he's done a great job. I mean, he's a human being. Every once in a while, you might make a tiny misstep. I can't off the top of my head.
Pretend he's Joe Biden for a minute and try that, answer that question again.
Well, you know what? Honestly, if he was doing the things Joe Biden did, if President Trump let inflation go through the roof, if President Trump opened up the borders and allowed children to be trafficked, fentanyl to be trafficked in, if President Trump was trying to start up wars rather than bring about peace, I would be very critical of him. Trust me. I'm very realistic. And if he were doing things that were dumb and stupid, I would be all over it, calling it dumb and stupid. He's doing things that are strong, that are brilliant, and that I believe will help restore America and return us to our greatness.
All right, well, Cenk Uygur, welcome to Uncensored. You're laughing, I suspect, not in a way that indicates fulsome support for what Ms. Lake was just saying.
No, not fulsome support at all. All right, so first, usually, obviously we're always fair, right? So in the beginning, he comes out and he closed the border, and that's really popular. That's what people elected him for. He does a lot of executive orders. Now, a lot of those in the beginning, very beginning, I disagreed with instantly, but some of the later ones were more disastrous, but it looked like there was action being taken. So. And it showed in his polls. He'd already won the popular vote, and then he added to that lead in his polling. And that's back when, of course, Republicans believed in polling, when he was above 50% and popular, et cetera. And then what did he do? He pulled a Trump. He can't help himself. He loves his authoritarian tendencies, to put it mildly. He loves testing the limits of what he could do. He started talking about third term, started saying we're not doing due process, we're not listening to the courts, et cetera. And now he's lost people on all sides, the wild, outrageous tariffs. And, obviously, Batya and Kari and I had a debate about that, and I was right and they were wrong. And so I'm curious to see if they'll admit that now, because I said, of course, Trump will pull back the global tariffs. They were nuclear and ridiculous. And he pulled them back, 2 days after we had that debate? So now he's made a giant mess of it. I mean, everyone from Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Patrick Bet-David, Dave Portnoy, Joe Rogan, and yesterday Alex Jones, all saying, what's going on here? Even they didn't sign up for violating the Constitution and due process and all of that, let alone the trillions of dollars he's bled out of the market by having no idea how to handle things economically. So he started out strong in the beginning for a couple of days, and then the rest has now just been a total debacle and disaster. And Piers, I'm always amused by both sides, and you've seen me call out both sides live as it's happening when the Democrats were like, oh, Joe Biden's polling's in the 30s, but I bet it bounces back to the 60s, or polling doesn't matter. Whenever they're down, always polling doesn't matter or polling is fake. And now when Trump is in the 39, 40% range, all of a sudden, here's Kari Lake telling us that polling doesn't matter or it isn't real. It's real. It's not perfect, but it's real. Trump is badly, badly hurt. I mean, geez, one last fact. 52% in a recent poll of Americans said that he was a, quote, a dangerous dictator looking to take away American democracy, including 56% of independents and a shockingly high 17% of Republicans think he's a dangerous dictator. You really can't handle it any worse than that.
Now, I may be about to shock you with this, but tallow is an exceptional moisturizer. The oil in our skin shares many of the same fatty acids as tallow, making it nearly impossible to beat. You can have silky soft skin, like me, with an all-natural alternative. It has no fillers, and it's much more than just a moisturizer. It can replace lotion, night cream, wrinkle cream, neosporin, and much more. It's powerful enough to heal your skin, but it's safe enough to spread on your toast. And if you're looking for natural solutions, what about your toothpaste? VanMan's Mint Bone Tooth Powder is packed with all the minerals and the nutrients needed to remineralize teeth. They use zero fluoride, SLS, glycerin, and foaming agents. The aim for all of VanMan Company's products is to be edible, especially those which are literally used in your mouth. Go to vanman.shop/Piers and use code Piers, that's P-I-E-R-S, for 10% off. That's vanman.shop/Piers and use code Piers for 10% off. I mean, Batya, you know, the stats tell a story. They're not always completely infallible, but they tell a story. You know, his approval rating, Trump, peaked at 52%, which was an incredible figure, given that it was down at 34% when he left office in 2021. But now it's slid back to 44%, which is an extremely rapid fall. And it's linked almost entirely to what's going on with the economy. Are you entirely confident that his strategy here is A, one that he planned exactly how it's rolled out, and B, that it's working how he intended it?
I don't really know about his intentions. Unlike you, Piers, I don't talk to him regularly. But I can tell you that I think it's going very, very well. I know the polling is bad. He started out with a large portion of the country who really, really dislikes him. He managed to convince a lot of independents and a lot of Democrats to give him a shot and to vote for him. But that doesn't mean that he convinced people to like him. He's a very polarizing person, just his personality. But I think when you look at the agenda, he has tailor-made this agenda for the new base of the GOP, which is the working class. And when you talk to working class Americans, which I do all the time, and I hear from hundreds, if not thousands of them on a regular basis, they love this. They feel like this is exactly what they voted for. The situation with China was unsustainable. It made the elites in this country very, very wealthy, which is why elites on the left and on the right are furious at him and why Wall Street is furious at him. But working class people see this as him turning the boat around and once again prioritizing American prosperity rather than what we've had, which is the pillaging of the middle class by the elites. And I think, you asked Tim Pool a really good question. Well, would you have cheered Joe Biden if he had done the same things that you liked here? Piers, it is unimaginable that a Democrat would do what President Trump just did, because Wall Street now is very much a funder of the Democrats. And if you look at President Obama, you look at his first action in office, it was given a $700 billion bailout to Wall Street while 10 million Americans lost their homes. And that included $30 billion of bonuses to the crooks who made those Americans homeless. He chose Wall Street over Main Street because the Democrats had become the party of the rich. And what we just saw is an American president choosing Main Street over Wall Street. And that is what people are going to remember at the end of the day from these 100 days.
Okay, well, look, Trump has used the opening moments of his 100 days rally to condemn a lunatic, dumb guy for demanding his impeachment. Well, Democratic Congressman Shri Thanedar introduced formal articles of impeachment earlier this week, citing acts of tyranny and abuse of power. And he joins me now. Welcome to you, Congressman.
Thank you.
So you're going hard on Trump. You're citing sweeping abuse of power, flagrant violations of the Constitution, acts of tyranny that undermine American democracy and threaten the rule of law. Out of interest, what has Trump done that has massively surprised you, or that most of his diehard supporters didn't vote for?
Well, look, the tariffs, this is Congress's prerogative. He took that over illegally, unconstitutionally, and made a mess of it. And that lost stock values, people's 401k value got lost. He made a mess of it, and he tried to bully China. That didn't work. And right now, prices of everything are going up. You know, he got elected because people thought he was best in handling the economy. It turned out that he made a mess of it. Prices have gone up. Now he's trying to tell Amazon, don't tell people that a tariff addition to the prices. He has trampled freedom of first right, freedom. Supreme Court 9-0 decision to bring Garcia back because he did not get the due process. Trump said he ignored that ruling. He just said yesterday that he's able to bring him back, but he will not bring him back. So he's defying Supreme Court. And that was the last straw for me. And that's why I introduced the articles of impeachment to impeach. This president must go. You know, he has done unconstitutional act, illegal act, and this cannot stand.
I mean, again, I'd simply say, what do you think that he's doing that his supporters didn't expect him to do? He said, I'm going to sort the southern border out, which he indisputably has done. I'm going to get very, very tough on deportations of illegal immigrants. And all right, there are one or two cases which have got the headlines, which are certainly, in my estimation, worth examining on a due process question. But the majority of people have been deported. There seems to be no question mark over. He's challenging court power in a number of areas, but has said ultimately he will abide by the will of the courts. None of this strikes me particularly, at the moment, the behaviour of a dictator who's just decided none of these rules count for me.
Well, look at all the polls. You know, there are several polls that came out last week, and he's underwater in almost every category, including economy, that is supposed to be his best category. And his own supporters are now, having buyer's remorse that they made a mistake, that he hasn't worked on the economy that like he said he's going to do. Instead, he's talking about Greenland and making Canada 51st state and then military action against Mexico. None of this his supporters expected him to do. They expected him to fix the economy because that's what they thought. And he said that's what he's going to do.
Out of interest, and look, I mean, this tariff war is still in a very early stage. You say that he hasn't succeeded in bullying China, as you put it, but how do you know it won't succeed over time? Trump Trump has launched a radical tariff war, no other word for it. What happens if in, say, 6 months' time, it turns out that most of the countries that the United States has trade deals with have renegotiated in America's favor, and including China? Now, in that eventuality, if the economy is doing well again, would you admit then that you were a little too hasty? In other words, should this be allowed to be given time to see if it works?
Look, we have seen the flip-flops. One day the tariffs are on. The very next day, he takes them off. He first acts tough on China, then he says he's going to be nice to China. You know, it's about how he wakes up in the morning and whatever, he thinks about. There is no plan. There is no, plan or strategy here. It's just Trump, whatever he thinks he is. He has got a defense secretary who can't keep any secrets, sharing sensitive information on Signal chat. This is, he has got a Health and Human Services Secretary that is making, horrible medical decisions. He's got a staff that is not, he's got a cabinet that's not competent. And he's just,
Do you agree? Do you agree that he has stemmed the issue at the southern border by 95%? That the number of people coming in illegally on that border has reduced by 95%. Do you accept that? And do you think that's been a good thing, a successful story? If you're always on the move, as I am, you probably find it difficult to get all of the fruits and vegetables you need to keep your body and your doctor happy. Well, today's sponsor, Field of Greens, makes it all very easy. One delicious glass contains a full spectrum of vegetables, herbs, spices, fibre and antioxidants. Every ingredient is selected by doctors and science-backed to support your heart, your kidneys, metabolism, immune system and healthy bloody cells. They're so confident in this product, they will refund you if your doctor doesn't notice an improvement in your health. Well, we've teamed up to give you a 20% discount and free shipping on your first order. Go to fieldofgreens.com/Piers. Use the promo code Piers to get 20% off. That's fieldofgreens.com/Piers.
There has been some progress on protecting the borders. He's put the military on the border, but we are also seeing American citizens being deported. 2-year-old young American children have been deported. People, American citizens, children with cancer have been deported without due process. So it goes both ways. While some accomplishments have been done at the border, he's also, not given the due process to many of the immigrants.
Let me bring in Tim Poole. Tim, your response to the Congressman and his plan, well, he's not planned, he's gone ahead with it, issued articles of impeachment against Trump.
Factual but not truthful. American citizens weren't deported. That's just not true. Due process was given to all of these people. Look, if you want to argue that someone like Abrego Garcia deserved an additional hearing, a third or fourth hearing, or that as the actual due process they're concerned about pertaining to him is a USCIS interview to determine the current standing of Guatemala and this Barrios 18 gang, by all means, send a USCIS agent down to El Salvador, his home country, and have that conversation. But instead of actually dealing with these issues, what do we get? Bloviating nonsense. It's 100 days in, we're going to impeach him for what? Oh, he's doing all of these things wrong or whatever. Look, the American people voted for this. They're largely happy with what they want. People have concerns about the economy. His polls are down. That's true. That's fine. But a lot of this is hyper-partisan sophistry intended to rile people up. There's two reasons why I'll tell you Trump's polls are down. And they are down. If you track Rasmussen, he dropped by about 6 or 7 points from where he was earlier. It's a swing, not a drop. He's down by 4. And this is probably due to tariffs. When you look at the corporate press, the principal institutions, ABC, et cetera, he's down in the double digits. However, if you go back to the start of his second term, you can see that the polls completely disagree with each other in ridiculous ways. One day he's up 10, the next day a new polling agency says he's down 10. The only thing you really need to track is a singular poll's movement over time. And we are seeing a minor decline. That is likely due to 401ks dropping, people being concerned about this. Does this rise to the level of impeachment? No. I think you're doing this largely because you want to get your name out there because the Democrats have no front runner. No one knows who's in charge of the party. So everyone's clawing to the top of the crabs in a barrel to try and be the pick me for 2028.
All right, Congressman. Congressman, you're just doing this because you're a narcissist, basically.
Well, look, in the first 100 days, his numbers are lower than any other president. You had to go back 70 years. And the only other bad numbers for a president in the first 100 days was Trump 45. So people have spoken.
Is that why you're doing it?
People are having a buyer's remorse. People are, I've spoken to many of Trump's supporters, and they are hugely disappointed by his actions, by his failure to fix the economy. That's number one on people's minds.
Okay, Kari, what's your response to the Congressman? Because there are lots of people saying this, and the Democrats have got their gander up a bit now. They're beginning to marshal their so-called resistance in a better way because Trump's giving them a lot of opportunity to do that. At what point politically do you start feeling twitchy if the tariff war doesn't work how Trump intends it to?
First of all, where did this guy come from? No, with all due respect, this is an idiotic thing to do. And it's proving that the Democrat Party has no play. They don't know what to do right now because Trump is winning on everything. He's strategizing how to fix the economy that Joe Biden drove not only into a ditch, but off a cliff. And this is why the American people were suffering. And it sounds to me like this is a political move to try to put him in good graces with the AOC crowd and the very, very far left radical crowd ahead of another election. This is ridiculous. The American people were sick of the previous attempts of impeaching President Trump before. They don't want to see this again. And I'm embarrassed for this gentleman. I'm embarrassed for that congressman that he's doing that he's fallen to that level to try to impeach President Trump in his first 100 days as he tries to save us from the serious missteps of Joe Biden and that administration that almost broke the backs of every American in this country. What about the fentanyl that's no longer pouring across the border? What about the lives that are saved there? What about a president who's trying to end a war that's killing thousands, tens of thousands of people and costing all kinds of our treasure over in Ukraine? What about that? No, he's trying to concentrate on something to make people all of a sudden know who he is so that he can raise money and run for re-election. I find it despicable. I really do.
Congressman, you're despicable.
Well, that's just what.
No, the action is despicable. I don't know this congressman. I find his actions despicable and political. Rather than going to work every day and fighting for the American people in his district, he's trying to thwart President Trump as President Trump works very hard to try to save this country and get us on the right track.
Okay, Congressman, you're doing despicable things.
Well, look, he has failed on economy, our relationship with our allies.
He's not failed on the economy.
Unimpeachable.
Look, he said I understand, but on day one, he said he's going to fix Ukraine war. He hasn't done that in 100 days. Nothing that he said he's going to do he has done. And, economy is in terrible shape. His tariffs are totally unproductive. And auto industry, I represent Detroit, Michigan. The auto industry is hurting. Auto workers are losing their jobs. Auto factories in America are closing. Look, he hasn't thought this through. When you impose tariffs, you got to be ready to have manufacturing happening in America. I agree that more manufacturing needs to happen in America, but it doesn't happen just because he raises tariffs on foreign countries. You need to invest in manufacturing. This is a process that takes tens of years to get this done.
Okay, let me bring in. All right, let me bring in.
Is this Congressman out of Michigan? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
I represent.
And you're not for President Trump. You're not for the tariffs that are going to single-handedly save the American auto industry. Good luck. Good luck getting reelected.
Look, our car prices are going to go up. Domestic cars are going to be more expensive. Foreign cars are going to be more expensive. People won't be able to afford buy a car.
The American middle class is going to be bolstered and is going to come back alive, and they're going to be able to afford to buy things. And this is, we talked about this last time around. The American middle class was practically gone when President Trump stepped foot 100 days into the Oval Office. Give him a little bit of a chance here. 100 days is a lot to turn around Joe Biden, who, as I said, destroyed the American economy and continued to destroy manufacturing here.
All right, Cenk.
Yeah, so first of all, the propaganda is getting tiresome. Trump has done a brilliant job. You can't find one thing to criticize him over. And, and Joe Biden had destroyed the economy. It was record low unemployment. So you're being preposterous. No one believes you. Everyone realizes it was the tariffs. They had a perfectly good economy handed to him, and he, at this point, has shattered it to pieces. So I'm getting sick of the propaganda. I'm also getting sick of the, with all due respect, this is idiotic. That's not all due respect. I'm not sure you have good command of the English language. Okay. All right. Then don't say all due respect. Second of all, you're lecturing people about how to get elected.
The fact that he's a
Carrie, let's be
congressman.
honest. Let's be honest, Carrie. You and I are not in a position to lecture people on how to get elected. Okay. You haven't won a lot of elections. Neither have I. Okay. So at least I've helped in winning elections. I'm not sure you have. So, and the brother over here in Michigan has actually won an election. But we're conflating two different things. Okay. Number one, we're talking about the polling. Look, Trump's down and hurt. It doesn't matter how much you guys spin it. We're going to have that play out. But that's not related to impeachment. Whether he's popular or not has nothing to do with impeachment. So I don't even know why the congressman brought that up, to be honest. And I think that this impeachment thing is way too premature. What, are you going to get enough Republicans on board? There's no way you are, right? On the other hand, are there actual good grounds for it? There are. You're just not going to be able to execute it. The grounds for impeachment are doing things that are illegal or unconstitutional. Has he subverted the will of Congress? Many, many times. They appropriated money, he refuses to spend it. Or he's spending money that they didn't appropriate. Or he's taking powers like the power to tariff that Congress has, or the power to declare war that Congress has. I know that last one every president abuses. But we have massive violations of the Constitution here. The Supreme Court says bring this guy back, Abrego Garcia. Not only that, there was a clear do not deport order, and he violates that order and then admits that it was a mistake, and he still won't bring him back. The problem there isn't immigration, it's due process, which is the cornerstone of Western civilization.
But Cenk,
and Batya and Tim and others, look, we can go back and blame others.
Okay, but look, Michelle Obama piped up about this immigration stuff on X, and I replied to her, and my replies had gazillions of retweets, because all I said was, as far as I'm aware, her own husband deported over 3 million people in 8 years. And no one can persuade me that all of those were done with perfect due process, right? But I don't remember anything like the cacophony of outrage from the left when that was going down. And Obama, I've said this before many times, he was the deporter in chief, was his nickname in Mexico. He couldn't get people out of the country fast enough. Yeah. Why was it fine for Obama? And why do liberals just try and pretend that never happened? And why is it so evil when Trump throws out a lot of people that I would imagine most Americans totally agree with? Yes, there are some. Garcia may well be one or not. We don't really know yet whether he was in this gang or not. If he was, then he deserves to be in the El Salvador hellhole. If he isn't and he's innocent, he deserves to come back. But let's not pretend that most of the people that Trump is kicking out were not on the deportation list already and probably deserve to be thrown out.
Yeah. So, Piers, the beautiful thing about me is that I'm consistent on all these things. So when Obama did that, I criticized him. And in fact, when Obama killed Anwar al-Awlaki without due process, I was all over him. That was outrageous. It was and arguably worse than anything Trump has done. And that's where mainstream media loses all their credibility, and Democratic politicians lose their credibility when they're not even-handed. So that was totally unacceptable. But that doesn't make what Trump is doing acceptable. And Trump has he gone further than Obama in terms of turning people back at the border? When you turn people back at the border, as Trump is doing now and Obama did, that is not unconstitutional. But has he gone further? Yes. Did Obama ignore court orders? No. Did he say we should send American citizens to a foreign country like El Salvador? No. Did Obama say that he'd run for a third term, which is deeply unconstitutional? No. Did Obama kidnap people off the streets of America for criticizing Israel and arrest and deport them? No.
All right, well, hang on. Let me add some.
By the way,
hang on.
Let me finish the thought. There's tons of right-wingers who agree with me. Tucker Carlson agrees. Candace Owens agrees. Joe Rogan agrees.
All right, hang on. Let me add some things to your list. Did Obama campaign in 08-09 on a ticket of closing Guantanamo Bay because it was an illegal torture chamber and he was a lawyer? Yes. Is it still open? Yes. Did he deport more people pro rata than any president in history? Yes. Did he drop more bombs in a calendar year outside of World War II than America's ever dropped in a year ever? Yes. You know, did he run illegal drone programs that killed innocent people at weddings? Yes. In other words, you know, there are lots of things on Obama's watch. Yeah, right. So my point is, you've got to look at these things in totality. If I was in America, which I'm not, but I'm a proud, visa holder, and I have a home in America, I look at the success on the southern border as absolutely stunning. And yet the amount of coverage that's getting is almost nothing. And it says to me that the media
But
remains.
whose fault is that, Piers?
Well, it's the mainstream. To me, it's the mainstream media. Well, let me bring in Batya here. Batya, this seems to me that the mainstream media.
No, hold on. You asked me a question. Let me answer it real quick, Piers. So, look, in terms of the criticism of mainstream media that's hypocritical, I just pointed it out. But it's not mainstream media that did this. Trump, if he had just focused on closing the border, right now might be at 55% approval rating, or really high. I mentioned that right in the beginning. But instead, he bungled it because he's a serial bungler. And he keeps testing the limits of his power because he's authoritarian by nature. He didn't have to do those 4 or 5 unconstitutional things that I just listed. He did it on purpose. He's the one punching himself in the face. So don't blame media for that. That was all Trump.
All right, except that Batya, what I would say is, all right. Well,
That's the propaganda.
Tim, I will come to you in a moment. Let Batya just respond to that first.
Well, all of these marginal cases, when you actually look into them, turn out to be not so marginal. You know, Kilmar Garcia did not have an order not to deport him. He had an order not to deport him to El Salvador, so they sent him to the wrong country. But this person is a wife beater and a gangbanger and a human trafficker. He should have been deported to another country. We were let down as Americans because he got a lot of due process and they just didn't follow through because the immigration courts are deeply flawed. You look at these people who were picked up for supposedly criticizing Israel. They both, the two that are, in the news a lot, belong to a group called Columbia University Apartheid Divest, which put out literature 100% supporting Hamas and the October 7th attack. That is a violation of a green card. We would never have given somebody a visa who said, I'm going to belong to a group that's going to put out literature in support of Hamas. The 2 children who allegedly are American citizens who were deported, they were not deported. Their mothers were deported, and because their mothers are not sociopaths, they chose to take their children with them rather than calling up and finding someone else to take their 2-year-old children. So all of these supposedly liminal cases are actually nothing of the sort. There has been no constitutional crisis. This congressman seems to think that having bad polling numbers is an impeachable offense, is somehow a high crime and misdemeanor. It is utterly laughable, and it's because the Democrats have no agenda. Donald Trump is running to the left of them on economics and to the left of them on fighting wars and being anti-war and trying to get us out of different things and trying to settle wars. And he is a social moderate. He's not even a conservative. There is not a single value that the Democrats hold that they are not willing to immediately abandon if Donald Trump starts to defend it. It was the Democrats who thought that we had to control the border to protect working class wages. And now all you see is Democrats out there demanding free trade and demanding more access to China. You see Democrats literally sharing Chinese propaganda because it's against Trump. They have chosen China over their own working class voters. And Congressman, I'm sorry, but the UAW and the Teamsters have both endorsed the tariffs. You're in a lot of trouble in Michigan.
Yeah, well, look, auto factories are being closed. Auto workers are losing jobs. Look, the unconstitutional things. This president tried to the pump and dump scheme. Remember the memes that he profited from? Personally profited from. Remember that the freedom of speech, the lawyers who had fought against him, he intimidated those and then. But
Congressman, what about the sustained lawfare that was waged against Trump by the left? And by the way, one of the most self-harming acts of lawfare ever waged, because all it did was make Trump more popular and ended up getting him re-elected. So it was cretinously stupid to do it, but there can be no doubt that the left conspired collectively to try and take Trump down, put him in prison. You had people shooting him, literally, trying to kill him. And all of this led to Trump being in the White House. The Democrats have got their own backyard to clean up first before they start issuing any kind of, well, isn't this all terrible? When the way you treated Trump, many would argue, was despicable. Let me bring in Tim.
I have a favor to ask of this congressman, and excuse me, I hope Cenk joins me in this. Congressman, will you file articles of impeachment against Barack Obama for the extrajudicial assassination of Abdulrahman al-Awlaki?
I was not a member of Congress then. I am now. I have seen,
and we can convict him and put him in prison. if you want to
Yeah,
file those.
I have seen the unconstitutional, illegal activities of Donald Trump, and those are the ones that I am holding him responsible for.
Nobody cared when Obama murdered American citizens, especially a 16-year-old kid who was not a target.
Obama is
who had
not the
civilian
president
rights.
right now. Is Donald Trump is the president? Is the people are hurting? He is the one who is grabbing power. He is the one who's taking power away from Congress, and the funds that Congress has appropriated, he is not releasing those funds. He's putting a hold on that. He's the one that illegally put a DOGE and a unelected, unconfirmed Elon Musk in charge of it. He's the one who threw out that reporter from AP, from White House, trampling on freedom of speech of the press.
You're right. I should get permanent access to the White House. Otherwise, my free speech is being violated. So I'm going to go to the White House right now and insist that I'm much more well-known than that reporter is. So it's a clear violation of 1A if they don't give me a pass, right?
Well, he's used his power, his position, to intimidate media. He's used that to
so is Obama. This is ridiculous. When Anwar al-Awlaki was assassinated, an extrajudicial assassination, and his 16-year-old son by Obama, the Democrats defended this and they said he should have had a better father. No one cared. Nobody cared. I know Cenk cared. I know he's talked about it. I'm mad about it too. So now when you come out and you say Trump's going to be impeached because he's doing things that are unpopular, I'm personally offended.
It's not unpopular. It's illegal.
Murdered
illegal
Americans. No one did anything. And you could right now file those impeachment articles. We could get a criminal hearing and a conviction of Barack Obama for the murder of a 16-year-old. The 16-year-old Abdulrahman al-Awlaki was not a combatant. He was at a civilian restaurant in a country we are not at war with. And why won't anyone do anything about it? I'll throw a cherry on top. When Donald Trump in his first term, when he first gets elected, he ordered a commando raid in Yemen, which reportedly killed a 7-year-old American girl as well. We don't have the same evidence on that one. I want that criminally investigated as well. How about you pursue those cases? But you know what? You won't, because when it comes to bloviating nonsense pertaining to the economy or what Trump may or may not be doing, no one ever goes after the war machine. No one ever tries to target the extrajudicial authorities of the executive branch and their unilateral authority to declare war. There's never been a war declared since World War II, and you're not going to do anything about it. No one will.
Look, this president has personally gained through the meme coins. This president has personally gained through the deal that he forced and intimidated.
Well, do you believe? Okay, but let me ask you then, Congressman. Do you believe that Joe Biden personally gained from what his son was up to in Ukraine, working for energy companies for which he had zero experience? And has now given backdated pardons to all his family to protect any proper legitimate legal investigations of what they may or may not have been doing with countries like Ukraine and China, when there's a widespread belief they're all putting money in their pockets.
Well, I'm just here as a member of Congress. Yeah,
but it seems to me, with respect though, it just seems to me you are so blinded by totality of hatred to Trump and everything to do with him that you can't see the wood for the trees. You can't praise him for anything. And actually, you're not interested in any crimes committed by Democrat presidents. You're not interested in any money guzzling behavior by the previous incumbent of the White House. All you care about is Trump. And it would have been a little bit more intellectually honest if you had cared a little bit more about what your own party were doing, because they've been up to a lot of no good for quite some time.
Well, look, I had 12 in-person town halls in the last 40 days. I've talked with hundreds and thousands of people all across America. And people we worry about now. Donald Trump is the president today. He's the president for the last 100 days. His unconstitutional activities is what we are talking about here. And that's what my impeachment action is all about.
All right.
So that's really why I'm here.
This is just a way to raise money.
Can I defend the congressman a little bit?
This is just an attempt to
look,
raise
guys,
money for this
you're all going to whataboutisms here, and I can understand why, because Trump's in bad shape. So you're going back to Obama. Look, I agree with Tim on the Anwar al-Awlaki. I'm the guy who brought it up. I wonder if Tim agrees with me on cutting the Pentagon, because Tim, you and I agreed on cutting the Pentagon when I was on his show. And now all of a sudden they're not cutting. They're adding $150 billion. So they're frauds, right? Let's be honest about that, right? So, but we're going to whataboutisms here. We can go back to Grover Cleveland if you guys like, right? We can go back to James Polk if you guys like. But you're trying to distract from what's happening with Trump. I'm perfectly willing to criticize all the other Democrats in the past for all the things that they've done wrong. But right now, we got to rescue the country. And so at this point, there's two different problems. One is that Trump keeps doing things that are unconstitutional. And to your earlier point, Piers, that is not what people voted for. In fact, the reason Trump disavowed Project 2025 is because it was really unpopular. Now that he's actually doing Project 2025, yeah, it's really unpopular.
But what about
That's
this,
not
Cenk?
what
What about
people
this,
wanted.
Cenk?
They just wanted.
But Cenk, but what about this? Look, I saw what Caroline Levitt said in her statement about 100 days. In his first 100 days, Donald Trump's delivered on hundreds of promises and already accomplished his two most important campaign goals. The border is secure and inflation is ending. The next 100 days will consist of trade deals, peace deals, and tax cuts. More American greatness on its way. Now, putting aside any partisan kind of flavor to all this, and putting aside that clearly right now things look quite bad for Trump, I could easily see a situation in 100 days' time, maybe not quite as quick as that, but certainly not far off it, where he might well have got a number of advantageous trade deals done, including China, where he could have forged peace in Ukraine, bringing an end to that war, and might well have done the same in Gaza, in which case he would be odds on to win the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, this is not, in other words, it's all very turbulent, it's all very chaotic, but I could absolutely see a pathway to that all happening in the next few months. It could happen.
What if he
what if he turned into Santa Claus?
Well,
yeah, what if he turned into Santa Claus?
Which part of that do you think may not happen?
Out presents to everybody.
Yeah, but Cenk, which part of that may not happen?
I think all of it might not happen. In fact, Piers, I think absolutely none of that is going to happen. That's why I formed Rebellion PAC to give people a left-wing populist alternative. Real economic populism. People should go check out rebellionpac.com because we've got guys like Ro Khanna, Richard Ojeda, and other people who are actual populists who are going to do the things that Trump promised on the economic end and has not delivered. So, Piers, could he do one or two trade deals and then call it a day and pretend that he got a victory? He could, but it wasn't a victory. And if he keeps these tariffs on with China and others, soon we're going to have empty shelves. And all of this bloviating is going to be totally irrelevant because once those empty shelves hit or the higher prices hit, I mean, we had the stock market downturn. That's not even the big problem. He's already hit an iceberg with that. But that's the tip. The actual iceberg is the American people. And when their prices start going up and when they start seeing empty shelves, they're going to be furious because it's the exact opposite of what they voted for. And then you guys can come on here and start talking about Chester
I'm definitely going to get everybody
back. But it ain't
back.
going to make a difference.
Don't worry, I'm going to get everybody back in 100 days because I've got a feeling it won't play out how you think, Chen. But I may be wrong. Kari,
I love the fact that Cenk calls what he does all day bloviating. I agree, and I think if we pulled that, most of America would agree. But President Trump has to do the hard work. He's assembled an administration full of hardworking human beings. They sometimes they have a misstep, but they're heading in the right direction for America. It's not an easy job. He's taking a lot of criticism because people like Cenk have to bloviate all day, to use his words, and he's got to have something to talk about. And he would lose the audience he has if he started talking about how incredible this agenda has been and the rolling out of this agenda. It's not going to be perfect. We're living in a real world here, and we're having to pick up the pieces and clean up after a dismal administration that the congressman sat by and didn't do anything about. First of all, I've never heard of this gentleman. I never heard him talk about how disastrous the economy was under Joe Biden. And I think it's really appalling for the people of Michigan. It used to be a middle-class state. It is an important state when it comes to our automaking here in America, the industry, and to hear that there is a congressman from Michigan who is opposed to this tariff plan to bring back the manufacturing we so desperately need and the middle class needs in Michigan and all 50 states. It's
Okay.
pretty shocking.
You got to be ready to bring manufacturing back. Trump has done nothing to establish incentives to bring manufacturing to America. And just putting these tariffs on foreign countries just doesn't solve the problem. We are starting to see auto factories closing. We're starting to see auto prices going up. We're starting to see auto workers losing jobs. These tariffs are not good for Michigan, and these tariffs are not good for America, and these tariffs are raising American prices. This is like a Trump sales tax on consumer goods for America.
Let me bring in Batya. I mean, Batya, it's interesting to me to see a number of Trump, big supporters breaking ranks a bit on tariffs. Elon Musk clearly is very anti them. The Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy being very critical. Bill Ackman, the big billionaire investor, Ken Griffin, another billionaire investor, they've all spoken out against them as well. And we've just seen what I would think is quite a worrying moment for the Trump camp, which is what's happened in Canada, where you've got a Liberal candidate who's come from an apparent obvious defeat to seize victory by running on an anti-Trump ticket because of the way Trump spoke about Canada. I just think he's got to be careful, Donald Trump. I could absolutely see this working, but I could also see it blowing up in his face. It's a high-risk stakes that he's playing with here.
Yeah, rich people hate tariffs because they're supposed to. They are class warfare on behalf of the working class against the elites who have pillaged America's middle class for the last 40 years. We have sold out our children's future to China, which owns just trillions of dollars of U.S. Treasury bonds. That is not good. We get cheap crap from China. They get our children's future. Our kids are going to be paying off the interest on that debt for generations. They manufacture the PPE and the pharmaceuticals we need to fight the pandemics that come from China. They manufacture the ships we are going to need to fight China, our greatest adversary.
But I agree with you. See, I agree with you. Listen,
I know.
Yeah, but I agree with you. The question is,
I'm just saying, it was going to.
It's the tactic. Here's my question for you. It's the tactic. I don't think anyone. Hang on. I don't think anyone disagrees with the overarching narrative that Trump has laid out, which is China's been ripping off America for decades. It has. As you say, it owns a lot of American debt, very bad for America. All the experts in the American economy have led to an economy with $37 trillion of American debt. If that's a success, I'd hate to see a failure. This is an economy that Elon Musk keeps warning is extremely perilous longer term and could easily end up with America going bankrupt. So Trump is doing radical stuff. I get it. The question is, will the way he's going about this, as many economic experts fear, will it blow up in his face and make things a lot worse? It could.
So here's the point, Piers. No one else had the guts, the courage, or a plan for how to address this. Getting yourself weaned off of an addiction to cheap crap from China was always going to be difficult. And that is why nobody did anything about it, even though, as you say, Piers, we all agree that this had to happen. There was no easy way to do that. There is no easy way to get countries around the world who have been fleecing us with their tariffs to suddenly decide, oh, you know what, maybe this is not okay. Maybe we should stop enriching our elites on the backs of the American working class. What Trump did was it's really amazing. There is now a 10% global tariff, which the world is actually relieved about because it came down from the heights of Liberation Day. Do you understand what a feat that was? That is seen as an improvement from countries that for decades have been fleecing us with their own tariffs. So this was always going to be hard. I have not heard a single other plan for how to get American manufacturing back to America. And it's just nonsense that Trump hasn't done that. He has $1.5 trillion in manufacturing committed since the day that he took office. Nobody else was able to do that. And to do that, you need a carrot and you need a stick, because American corporations are not suddenly going to wake up and be like, oh, maybe having a sense of what it means to have prosperity for our entire nation is more important than our quarterly reports. That was never going to happen without a little bit of pain.
Okay. I want to wrap things by asking all of you. I want to ask all of you to give Trump a grade. We can have A to E or an F for fail. Cenk, this is the 100-day grade for the President Trump.
Yeah. Look, because he's so wildly unconstitutional, I want to give him an F-, but I'm fair. He did close the border, and he is taking a lot of action. I think it's bad action, but at least it's something. So I'll give him a solid D.
A solid D. Batya?
A+, but I really admire Cenk because I see you struggling to be fair, and even though I disagree with you, I admire that. I have to give him an A+. I think this has been, I never expected a president to fulfill this many campaign promises ever, certainly not in 100 days.
Before I ask
so
you, Kari, just to be clear, you can't go above an A+.
You can't do 2 pluses?
No.
I'm going to give him an A+ because he has followed through on his campaign promises. The people of this country are getting what they voted for, and they're ecstatic about it. And I believe that this congressman will really regret the day when he looks back historically and sees what an incredible, transformative President Trump will go down in history. He will be embarrassed about it. I cannot take this fake impeachment garbage seriously from a guy who looks like he pinned a squirrel on his head. He needs to get serious and start fighting for the people of Michigan and stop fighting the president who's trying to help the people of Michigan.
When you don't have a good argument, you attack personally. That's what you do. Look, this president has done illegal, unconstitutional activities. He has ruined the economy. People having buyer's remorse about him.
Okay, give me a grade, Congressman.
I would give him an F-.
F-,
for
okay.
the damage that he has created
and
in America.
here's a fact for you, Kari Lake, you may want to think about. The congressman, I've just been told, is 70 years old. You look about 50. What's your secret?
Well, he should be a little. It's about America. He should be more wise. At the age of 70, I would hope he'd be more wise in actually.
Can we at least agree he looks the most youthful 70-year-old I think we've ever had on Uncensored? So he may have a squirrel on his head, not my words, yours, Miss Lake, but he looks pretty good for 70.
Well,
he looks amazing for 70.
Look, I want America to look good and America's economy to do better and American people be able to afford things and have a better life.
Well, the beauty of all this is I can get you all back in 100 days. We would have asked Tim Pool, but we lost him. We had a technical issue there. I'm going to think that Tim might have given him a B, I think, if he was fair. Possibly an A, but I think he may have gone B.
I think he would have given him an A.
Maybe. Well, we'll find out afterwards. And if I got that wrong, I'll correct it next week. But thank you all very much to my team, and we'll get you all back to talk about 200 days and 300 days. There are only 10,000 days left of Trump, unless he decides to run again. So we shall see. We shall see how it goes. No. But I appreciate you all coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Piers.
Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate, and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.